Okay guys, so we are going to do the classic princess style line, but we're going to do the back bodice, and we haven't done a back yet, so this is very exciting. So our back bodice that we have already has 2 darts. It has this little tiny shoulder dart and actually a really tiny little waist dart too. And why are the darts so tiny? Because in the back of our bodice there's not a really big curve going on. There's no bust. It's pretty smooth. There's really just a little bit of fit, a slight rounding around our shoulder, and a little nipping in for our waist. So there's a lot less going on with fit in the back of the bodice. So the first thing we'll do is we'll trace this. And if you want to make your life easy, you can retrace your back bodice also onto cardstock, or you can just trace from this paper. I'm going to try to just trace from the paper if I can, and remember to mark those notches for your darts. There's a double notch in the armhole, and the reason that there's a double notch in the armhole is so that at a glance you could tell which is the front and the back. If your pieces were cut and you couldn't tell really quickly, the back bodice always has a double notch in the armhole. It's a little trick to remember. But otherwise we'll get all of our notches for our darts. Ooh. And we'll trace overall shape. The grain line comes right off of the center back. It's parallel, so I don't have to stress that. But I do want to make sure that I get my dart points. So I can just use my pencil and kind of make a little hole right there. I'm trying to make sure this doesn't move, and I've got to do it for this tiny little shoulder dart too. And then you can check, and hopefully I've got everything. So I'll go ahead and retrace my dart legs. So from the dart point, in this case it's not really a bust point because there's no bust, it's just the dart point, to the leg. I'll go ahead and make those a little larger just so you can see. So I've retraced that. Get rid of all this excess paper. There we go. And I'll trace these legs as well on this tiny, tiny little dart. There we go. And everything else should be in there. And I'll go ahead and put in my green line now. And I'll come right off of my center back, about a ½ inch in. And the center back, we could cut on fold, but then there'd have to be an opening in the front, right? Like say you were doing a button-up shirt. In this case, because we've already got our center front cut on fold, well, the opening has to be back here. So we can't do this as cut on fold. It'll just be a regular grain line, and then what can we say? Cut 2, okay? So let's go ahead and get down to our shape. So just like we did with the front for the classic princess, we want to draw a nice pretty line from here to here so that we can break these up, and so there are no darts. It's just 2 pieces that come together with shape. So this seems pretty easy. We can just connect the dots like this with our straight line, right? And it's pretty good. Or we can just skip a step and use our French curve to make a really nice pretty shape. And so what I might do is say I'm connecting this line here to this line here. Even though the dot is the same, it just kind of helps me to understand where I'm placing this. So see, this is going to be a really nice shape, connecting the 2. There we go. And see, now I've got a nice pretty curved line, as opposed to if I did it with a ruler, and then I would have to curve those kind of after the fact. But this is going to be really nice and pretty. So what we can do now is just like we did with the first one, we're going to cut these 2 apart. So let's do some things first. So we've got our grain line over here, but we're going to need a grain line here. So same thing, I can square right off of that grain line. So 4 inches is kind of close to the edge. Let's come off like 3 inches. See, and I'm lining this up here. And now I can make a green line on this side. I can make it a little longer if I want. But again, you would, once you cut that up, you might have a tendency to use this side seam line, side seam, but again, we don't want to. We want to come off of that original grain line, so really important to transfer it now. And the other thing we want to do is put some notches in where we're going to connect these two pieces back together. And a really great place to do that is just where there's already that dart point. So I'll just draw a line right there at that top dart point, and I can do the same thing right here. Maybe I'll just come really straight. There we go. So I've got it here and I've got it here. Now I think I have enough marked that I can cut this up. So again, I'm going to cut away my pencil line, but I'm being really careful for accuracy. Oh, I do want to make sure I don't cut off my armhole notches, so I'll just make sure they extend into the pattern so that I can trace it. Cutting nice and slow and smooth to make sure I don't lose anything and that my shapes end up being the same. And I'm using these like silly baby child scissors, so maybe if I had adult size scissors, this would go faster. But I just grabbed these really quickly. There. And the bottom. And again, pay attention to any slight curve on that waist, any slight curves anywhere. So we've got the bulk of it cut, but now we're going to go ahead and cut our two pieces apart. And then so if it isn't obvious, you'll have two front pieces for the classic princess, and you'll have two back pieces. So overall, for this particular pattern, you've got 4 pieces. And see how now this one looks like this, and it's this really nice, pretty shape. And now I've just got to get rid of the dart excess on this side. And it's a pretty good shape. There is like a little bump out kind of right here and right here. I could always slightly kind of clean that up when I retrace, which I probably will, because that's what comes next. Okay, now I've got these 2 pieces. Now I need to retrace. I'm trying to see, you may be able to fit this on one piece of paper like that, if we want to try to retrace it this way and just give ourselves room to add seam allowance. So let's see if I can do that. The first one may have fit too, but may have been a little tighter for the classic princess front. But these 2 pieces are nice and small, so they should fit here with no problem. Okay, so I'm tracing the entire shape, and I've got the 2 notches, and my grain line is going to come off of that center front. So I just transfer that grain line right now. And again, this is cut 2. And now I can go ahead and just add seam allowance. So I still do need seam allowance on this center back seam, because that's where I'd say like add a zipper or something like that. Add buttons. And I'll add seam allowance up here to the neck. Just toggling around slightly, trying to be very accurate. It's a little bit different from the front, but ultimately the same. You've got the neck, the armhole, the shoulder straight across. Let me see how this waist. This waist is pretty much straight across. It has like the slightest little hook of a curve down at the bottom. And now this does kind of go straight and then kind of bump in a little bit here. So I can follow that seam curve. And I can kind of make slight adjustments to that curve to kind of true it up. So it's just, I mean, just sort of like smoothed it out a little. You can also use your French curve here to smooth it out a little bit. And I'm going to draw these notches all the way. And square my corners. Come down here and square my corners. Okay. And apart from this being a little kind of muddy in places, but I can smooth it out. I think this is pretty much done. Oh, I forgot one up here. Okay, so again, I can just erase all my edges, smooth out anything super bumpy. Oh, and then cross my notches here. But this, I basically have my classic princess back, or you could say center back. And I could even write there, center back, so I know that that is, but my classic princess back. And then let's see if I can trace my side back right next to it. So just give yourself room to add seam allowance. Make sure you're retracing all of the notches. And then with this, I need to use my tracing wheel to get that green line. There we go. So I can come in right away and get that green line. And this will also be cut to. And I can just start adding my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'll go for that shoulder first, and then hit this armhole. I'm moving so much because it's hard for me not to knock the camera down with my ruler as I'm like on top of this thing, trying to toggle. If I knock the camera down, I'll have to start over. And I am trying to be done. Trying to get it perfect for you the first time. And then here is my side seam, which should be nice and straight. You can always feel free to make these marks for yourself, just to remember. This seems pretty straight here. There might be a little curve, like microscopic. I'm not really detecting a curve so much back here. And remember, you've definitely got this pretty curve that we built in with our French curve. So just slide that ruler around slowly and add your perfect seam allowance. Make sure your notches go all the way across and are crossed. And then you can square up your corners and clean up anything that shifted or doesn't look right. Make it all nice and neat. So we've got square corners, square corners. I think we've got almost all. Okay. So I think this looks good. I'll just touch up my edges, erase where I went too far, and I think I pretty much got it. So this is my classic princess side back, and I've got cut two. And so here, if I've got it on the same page, again, I could draw my back, which is the same shape, nipped in, and then has the same thing going on. Mid-shoulder down to the waist, just like that. And that's my back. And so together with my two front pieces, I've got a whole bodice that I can make up from these.